Hallo, guten Morgen. Welcome to Creative Mornings. I'm impressed. This is by far the biggest event we ever had since Creative Mornings is in Munich. It's As always, I will say a few words about Creative Mornings itself. Do you have the slide? Thank you.
I've already contributed.
Thank you. So Creative Mornings is a brand which is worldwide. We have 190 cities participating in this monthly breakfast lecture series event. It was founded 2008 in New York by a lady called Tina Roth-Eisenberg. And I want to say thank you for IBM for having us here to make all this possible for the breakfast, for the location. Thank you, IBM Watson. And that's also where I wanted to introduce Niklas. That's the Hausherr. He wants to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, and also very warm welcome from my side. So I'm very proud and impressed. So many people. Can you all see us, or at least hear us? I hope. So this building is, as you may know, has been opened a few months ago, and this is so resonating in the market already. So this is also impressing us. We started here with this unit of IBM in 2015. We thought about where to place the global headquarters. So IBM has just a few global headquarters, and we decided not to go the normal way, means to have a headquarter at East Coast US. And so we decided to found and open the first global headquarter of IBM this time in Munich. So this is the first time that IBM has opened a global headquarter outside US, and so we are more than proud that also such an event, such a great event, is taking place here in our building, in our rooms. What we are going for here, and this is the second change we made to make it special, not just outside US, but also a normal headquarter you would expect all the functions, so HR, finance, operations, admin, and so on. What we decided is, and so this made us very proud that we started from the beginning to design this way and now to run it, is that you have all the people here in, not from an operations perspective, but from a value creation perspective. So starting with research, all the developers, system engineers, solution architects, designers, data scientists, consultants, and so on, but also marketing and sales are all here in the building. So we brought all the people here together as an epicenter to work not just for us, for our own solutions and portfolio, but also for with our clients and partners here in the building to create value. And this is so interesting and amazing developing already, that already clients asked us, can we join? And now we have, I think, 8 or 9 companies already, not just asking us for joining this, now we call it an ecosystem, not a center or headquarter anymore, to enter and to join this ecosystem. As an example, BMW was the first one we announced end of last year already. We have BNP Paribas, one of the largest banks in the world, also co-locating with us here, means having their own people here on a permanent basis, located as, let's say, their office in our area, to work together with us on solutions. And I hope you will see many things. And so John, he is the one we also, let's say, pulled over from United States to work with us here, and you will learn why. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I introduce John, I need to say thank you to the team who's making every of these events possible. Thank you, team. And please, if you do something on social media, if you write, if you take photos, if you tweet, if you do Instagram, please use these hashtags to promote the event. The topic for this month is equality, which is proudly presented by our new fantastic global partner, Adobe. Adobe is a Creative Mornings partner for creative tools. And that's the point where I want to introduce you, John, because you are, as IBM Fellow, you will give us a perspective on your personal interpretation of equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I've
Oh,
got
you
one
have
of these,
yours, yeah.
but I need that. No,
You need that.
thanks. Okay, thank you very much. This is so exciting. I have a question. How many of you are technical? How many of you are designers? Technical? Oh, I had asked, of course, as an engineer. Anyway, this is really fun. I mean, this notion of having like a theme. We have in my country, we have a thing called Iron Chef. Do you know this idea? And like the secret ingredient is anchovies and watermelon, and go. And so I feel like, okay, equality. So we are very, very, as Niklaus said, we're very, very pleased to have you here in our building, and hope you come and stay. So I, just by way of introduction, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I think the biggest thing I would say is that actually the real identifying thing is I'm a nerd. Now let me ask that question. How many of you are nerds? I mean, you can be design nerds, you can be like, and I have been working in this field for 36 years, actually 40 years if you count during school. And most of what the good that has come for me, I'm very senior in my company, but most of the good things, including promotions, has been because I've been funny looking, and I know that. And it's a brand, and you guys know all about brands. But let me introduce you a little bit, just as background, to a couple of other people. This is, or was, my father-in-law, Gabe Mariano. And Gabe was an amazing guy. He worked for IBM all his working life. He worked there for 36 years as well. As a matter of fact, this is the only job he ever had. This is the only job I've ever had. In his 36 years, I mean, he got hired right out of high school when IBM sent him to IBM College. They used to go out in the parking lots and do jumping jacks every morning while the CEO sang songs, yelled songs. And through the course of his life, it was very interesting, because we had a long, great relationship. He passed away about 3 years ago, but he loved making things. And this is a big inspiration to me. He made these big devices out of granite and steel for making the little holders for the chips for the computers that we were building. And over his 36 years, that technology changed a lot. But he kept making, he kept having to remake and make stuff. The best thing he made, though, was my wife. And Diane, or is this the only screen? Yeah. So Diane is awesome, well constructed, I might add, and it's really cool. So she worked for IBM for 8 years, and so she's a totally IBM issued wife. I mean, it's a pretty good company when they, when they give you the goods like this. She now teaches yoga, but the reason I tell you this, and I should say that I've only had 3 hours of sleep. I know there was a reason. The reason I'm telling you this is that next month, the three of us collectively in some way are celebrating 80 years of IBM. Now that is something weird to think about. Now I'm not saying that's good, I'm not saying that's bad, but boy, how many of you have had a job for 80 years? Okay, well good, there's one thing. But that, I'm going to lead into equality, I promise, but I wanted to say a little bit about how I got this job, because I said most of what I got in world was because of being funny looking, but it actually turned out to be, in this case, it was being playful. And that was a very interesting thing. And I promise I'll get to equality. But the basic thing, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I didn't even know. I'm the chief scientist for IoT, for Internet of Things. How many of you know Internet of Things? Oh, geez. No wonder we put our center here. That's good. But I mean, a year and a half ago, I didn't even know how to spell IoT. And so what happened, though, is I looked back. I've been a nerd forever. I went to a very nerdy school, MIT, and there's a group that we get together with every every month called Vomit, Vermont's own MIT club. And Vomit does projects that are trying to help the world and use geekiness. And so we once got this assignment to go build something that was, everything I build is 7 meters tall, but this thing goes from 1 meter to 7 meters tall, and it's robotically controlled, wirelessly controlled robot that is designed to cause spontaneous urination in children. It was for a fundraiser, and it was a great use of an MIT education. So I had built things like this. I don't even know how to describe it. Also 7 meters tall. It's a thing for carrying hippies across a desert. Do you know Burning Man? Burning Man? Okay, so you know what? That's our common thread, because that is where I realized that there was about that much designer in me. You know, because when I was out there on the playa in the middle of the night, you know, doing tech, hanging upside down off the, you know, trying to get the lights to work again, I met my first person who kind of came out as a designer, you know, turtleneck and everything, and I went, we do the same thing. We do the same thing. So that was pretty cool. So anyway, building these things was my credentials. That is, because I had been doing chip design for 30 years. Now, okay, so that led me here. And as Niklaus said, this center is really a fun place. I live in Vermont, I work here, so I average somewhere under Iceland. But my job is to try to figure out, does this have a thinger? No, okay. My job is to figure out actually how to make this building come alive using IoT. And that's been really fun, because my sort of maker-hacker culture that I came with is actually in use here. Twice I've been caught, you know, pulling light switches off of the side to be able to figure out how, so we can control all the lights in the buildings with Watson. And the only way I was able to do that is to sneak in here at night and pull the wires out of there and kind of, but that's how you discover stuff. And I haven't gotten fired yet. But our whole idea, as Niklaus pointed out, is to try to collaborate across all of these floors. And we have designers, cognitive scientists, researchers, everybody here. And that's what's so fun. And that's what leads me to getting back to the point about equality. Because here is my thesis. I think that technology, and specifically IoT, my favorite kind of technology right now, is a huge enabler of equality. But at the same time, I'm going to also at the end go, yeah, but there's some problems. So let me give you my short pitch for why I think technology will save us all. Not save us all, but I think technology and IoT can be great levelizers in the world if we treat this right. So a little bit more history. I told you I've been in this business for a long time. In 2011, my company turned 100 years old. I think some of you work for older companies. There's a lot of how many of your companies have been 100 years old? Allianz, I know that, right? Yeah, you guys have good bones. This is good. So this happened back in 2011. And how many of you love your job every day? Okay, let me just say that this came about at a time where I was struggling a little bit on what I wanted to do when I grew up. And a long story there. But I got asked, because I was the funniest looking person in my state, to go tell the story of the growth of microelectronics. I'm a chip guy. I build little chip stuff. But I think that the first reason that tech is an equalizer right now is because technology has gotten cheap. The economics of basically moving from generation to generation to generation has made it possible to put amazing amounts of hardware in people's hands for almost nothing. Cell phone, I would almost say, like, does anyone not have a cell phone? I mean, this has more compute power than the original computer I learned on at IBM that you had to boot up with punch cards. Okay, I mean, these things are actually, you know, I don't know how many of you are like makers, but devices like the Raspberry Pi or Arduino or photons like that are on this. These things, I mean, this thing costs €9 and has more processing speed than the first desktop computer that I had. Now, albeit it was a pretty lame desktop computer. But Oh, I forgot to show one of my toys. But basically what we were trying to, what I was going back to show is that in 100 years, I had to explain what had happened to drive the cost of hardware down so much. And it was really interesting. I had to make this article, and I live in a small state, Vermont, and the newspaper, the one newspaper in the state, had a picture of me looking kind of grizzled and a big set of chip wafers. You know how chips come on wafers? And underneath it, it said, 100 years. And I saw the governor of our state, and he goes, I didn't even think you were 90, you know? And I was like, but the story is really an interesting one about that equalization. This basically says, starting from the beginning, and by the way, IBM started by making meat grinders, and sometimes it still feels like that, but it's mechanical processing, electromechanical, vacuum tubes, discrete transistors, bipolar integrated circuits, and CMOS integrated circuits, how much compute power you could get for $1,000. This is a huge democratization scheme because I can now make chips so cheaply that they can be used for simple things like this. It puts that kind of innovation, that kind of power in the hands of everyone. And that has been absolutely amazing. I mean, just my colleagues in research are building chips that are about 200 microns on a square. That's 2 human hairs, high and low. And they will be able to measure something, communicate with the outside world, and do it securely. And they're so cheap. The ones that we're building right now are 3 euro cents. And they're so cheap that most of that effort is finding them and putting them somewhere. But the cool thing about it is with 3 cents, you can put them in anything. You can put them in food wrappers. You can put them in food. And because they're so cheap, you don't even have to reuse them. I mean, don't think too much about it, but you know, you can put them in food and you can eat them. We have been doing that. Well, a little bit more experimentation. But the whole idea of the democratization of being able to put this into people's hands, I believe, has enabled a huge amount of innovation. You know, you don't have to be a big company. You can be a kid going online, buying these components and innovating. It's a big equalizer. Now, just one interesting side point is that you see these this growth. This is over 100 years of sustained increase in capability and decrease in cost, but it hasn't been smooth. There are all of these disruptions, and I think that kind of viewing how one technology gives way to another, that might be an interesting topic for a Creative Morning sometime. Okay, now what that led to, the fact that cost of computing was going down, and not just computing, just technology, gave the second big equalizer, and that is democratization of data. So whenever you think about whether it's open source, open data, open hardware, all of these hardware platforms are all open. You can get the designs yourself, build them yourself. They're clones, they're made in every country of the world, and that allows the technology to get everywhere, and that in turn allows data. So data, once the realm of just big companies or big governments, there are so many. How many of you are involved in open source of some sort? More of you should be. Okay, that's good. But open source kind of is not just something for software. It's not just something for hardware. It's, for example, one of the subparts of our company is something called Weather Underground. And Weather Underground is the largest citizen science network in the world. Basically, you can buy these little cheap weather stations, like this is the one that I have at home, and we have a network now of 250,000 of these around the world. Now, anyone can join. You can make your own stations, whatever, but the data that you donate is available to anyone. I mean, there's some commercial terms, but for the most part, the data is available free, and you can add in new features. Now, I'm just calling this out because I had this as a prop, but there are so many things out there for open data. One of the things that's interesting in Munich is you're one of the leaders in open data for IoT. If you get a chance and you walk on the bridge on the 20th floor, you'll be able to hear some music. This is taking open data that's available from everything from the subways to the amount of power being generated to the noise abatement at the airport. This is data that's being published out there for anyone to use. Anyone can publish, anyone can use. So I say that technology, that innovations in hardware technology has made innovations in data, which is basically knowledge, has equalized it, and I think that is an amazing thing. Third point is I think that technology can be a huge enabler. What technology does, not only does it help us share knowledge, but it helps us share ability. In this very room, we've had two, not just one. That's kind of interesting. We have a speaker series, and we've had two colleagues of mine that are blind. This guy, I've always wanted to do that. This is my friend Simon. He is an amazing guy. He is an ultra marathoner. He runs 400-kilometer races, and he's blind. He's totally blind. And I met him on a run, on a, what is 8 miles in real speak, a 13-kilometer run. And I'm a good runner. I could not keep up with him. It was really amazing. And I couldn't figure out, how is he doing this? And his answer was, he falls down a lot. But, so, no, but seriously, it was, so we decided, where's my thing here? So we actually spent a weekend here building a simple prototype. We're actually building a bigger thing like that. This is a simple device, very simple. His big thing, there's all sorts of technology that has enabled him to do these races. He was running across Africa. Yeah, and you know, that was working pretty well. The problem that he finds, though, is when he's running in like New York Marathon or Boston Marathon, is because he's so fast, is getting between people. So he has great navigation. They take care of the track, so he knows to go and run and then take a left. He can't tell if somebody's standing there. And so he wanted something that would help him figure out, was there a gap between two people that was big enough to run through? And so we experimented just for this weekend, and this is basically an ultrasonic thing with a specifically shaped beam, and it buzzes. As you get close, you can tell how close you are, and you can actually, just by doing this, I wanted to put it on his head, but he made the point that he can do this and run into a wall. So basically, we just, put this together using the technology from our building, and he was running around us in there, and it was so cool. And I mean, this is a toy, but we're actually building it out. But I would say that people who have different abilities, sight, we have people who, the other speaker, who my friend Cheiko-san is an IBM fellow, she has a system for being able to navigate a grocery store that can tell you, where the Cheetos are, where's the chocolate stuff, and tell you you don't need that candy bar. But the idea that technology can make us all able, or maybe even super able, is, I think, a huge equalizer. Okay, so that's my pro argument. Do I still have time to talk? Okay. So I don't know how this is working. Now, on the other hand, I wouldn't be doing the right rhetorical thing if I said, it's all peachy and rosy, right? Because technology is neutral. I mean, it's like nuclear power. It's really great until you get some of it on you. So you got to be careful, right? So we're going to say, I wanted to think is technology an equalizer? I'm a technologist, but I know that we have that with, who was it? Was it Spider-Man? No, Spider-Man's uncle. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that we really got to look at technology and say, okay, where is this going? And I think that all of it is solvable, but it's things that we need to take care of. So first, I think, you've heard about the digital divide, right? Okay, so technology is getting really cheap. Data is getting open, but it is really, really concentrated in the evolved world. And the tech that could actually help people in some parts of the world isn't affordable there. And if we're not careful, we'll create a digital divide, a haves and have-not. We'll create the people who can afford technology will get it. The people who need it the most won't get it. The same is true in any innovation, medicine, what have you. But I think, so this is interesting. We actually, same network as this, and with your company, well, relative, forget that. Okay. We're working with agencies in sub-Saharan Africa. We've donated almost 1,000 of these kind of sensors to put on an open network. The data is free for everyone, and we're using it for a number of things. We're using it to help farmers figure out when planting should go, and trying to figure out when they've had drought problems that they need insurance. But we're also letting them have the data, so if they have entrepreneurial ideas on, there have been people who have been using the data for building trucking systems and stuff like that. The point is that somehow, as technologists, we need to come up with business models that allow the technology to go to the places that it's needed. Because otherwise, greed, is that the applied word? Business, let me just say something better. Business will push us to use the technology where it's convenient, but not necessarily where it's needed. So I would say technology can be an equalizer, but if we're not careful, it can strengthen a digital divide. So that's one thesis. The other, and the biggest one from my standpoint, is privacy. How many of you have like a running watch, like an Apple Watch or something that senses this? Okay. Have you ever thought about what information that has on you? I mean, well, let me just start with, these are my beautiful girls. This one is my wife, my 2 dogs, and 2 out of the 3 of them have IoT sensors in them. And Diane is just resisting, but this is a veterinary tag. But when you start to put devices on you, you start to give away information. Now, sometimes that information is very helpful. I want to know how much did I exercise, et cetera. But those devices that you wear, they know a lot about you. I mean, I can show you on my what do they call it? Telephone. Yes. I can show you. If I run across you in the street and then I see you the next day, I can tell that I've just walked next to you. I can connect that with where you live, and I can sort of put together a story of who you are. One of the how to say this the right way. Having worked in this industry for a while, you have to go out of your way to not learn stuff about people, where they live. There are certain physical movements that are very distinctive that you have to go out of your way not to learn. Did that come across okay? No. So, I mean, your devices know when you're being romantic, and because of that was tactful. But I mean, and they know whom with. So you've got to think about what information we're giving out, okay? And you basically have to be very, very careful to not remember. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about working in EU and in Germany in particular is that Germany and EU are particularly careful about data. So do you know what GDPR is? Whatever it's called. But it means the don't take private data and be really careful if you ever do and don't save it act that came out of Brussels. And that has been a really interesting experiment because as a scientist, making sure that we don't find out information that we could, we have to be good stewards. You, all of us, need to be advocates because privacy on one day, it may look like a really good idea that you like. What's the name of that company? Goggle? No, that Google, they get a lot of information about you driving around, and then all of a sudden you're starting to get spammed with ads. Well, that might not be so great. But what if that information falls into the wrong hands? I mean, can you imagine a situation where your government elected strange people and, So you have to be very careful. So as all of us, we have to be incredibly strong advocates for privacy. We own our data. We own, we can't let big companies, even mine, take the data without knowing where it's going to go. My company is very, very careful about that. But we all have to be extreme advocates. Finally, the maintain control. We do a lot of work with Watson, which is a combined set of AI techniques. And, it's probably the 3rd sentence out of everybody's mouth is this Skynet? When will it take over the world? And I want you to know that I'm not programmed to respond to that. So, no, but seriously, we're starting to get really freaky. There's a magical thing that is happening right now. That artificial intelligence, specifically techniques around machine learning, have just maybe 2 to 3 years ago just hit this, this magical point because we had enough, going back to the free computing, things are getting so cheap that all of a sudden, because kids wanted to, well, not just kids, people wanted to play video games. Video game accelerators got fast enough that somebody said, hey, we can run neural nets on it. And now everything is using these neural networks. I mean, you know, Germany is going to be the first place that has really widespread autonomous driving, you know, self-driving cars. And it's scary to think about it, but on the other hand, how many of you have been on an airplane? Do you know how long a pilot absolutely has to be in control of an airplane, say flying from London to Munich? It's 45 seconds. And it's just during takeoff. And it's a legal problem. And it's a legitimate legal problem because there's a part during takeoff that you have to make a decision, you know, yes or no. But it's usually, I'm always told that's misleading because normally they're spending a lot more time on it because they have to earn their pay. I mean, they're really doing stuff. But in terms of, we've been used to this automation, but we have to be very careful as we do this. So there is, I welcome, you know, this question of superintelligences. I have no doubt that there will be piecemeal intelligences that far surpass ours, or there will be extensions to our own intelligence. I do think that without a whole lot of worry, we just have to make sure that critical decisions like, you know, making a cut with a knife or shooting a gun or things like that, that we make sure that we're very careful and put a human in that loop, certainly during the early stages of that. So our way of thinking about that is making sure that you don't delegate decisions that you don't think you should. I know that sounds like kind of wishy-washy, but it's actually a very, very easy decision point. Now, at some point, though, with things like driving, as you get more comfortable, you can relegate these decisions to a machine, and though it's scary to think about that, public safety is going to actually get better. So you just have to proceed very, very cautiously, but I believe that with the right thinking, with the right ethics, and with the right advocacy of the public, we can use AI and we will not end up with Skynet. So I think this is a really interesting point because I believe that, you know, one of the things that's slowing down use of AI is people's fears. And I don't think those fears are completely unfounded, but I think that we can work together to evolve this technology to betterment of the world. So those are my 3 yeah buts. So let me just end on one thing that, so I think that the thing about the equality around anything is about sharing. And one of the great things about the things I put out there, that the lowered cost, the openness, and the levelization that technology can provide is really, really, I think, an amazing enabler. As a matter of fact, there's been more evolution in this field of tech in the last 40 years than in any field in recorded history, which is pretty amazing, since, you know, creation of fire and wheel, I guess, if you put that in there. But the main thing that I would leave you with is the best way to keep that going is to stay engaged. And one of the things, as an old guy, I look around at my colleagues, old guys and women who have, you know, technically very, very senior in my company and other companies. And the one thing that really sets them apart is that they're playful, that they, no matter how serious this stuff is, that they are working to, you know, this was why I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't really work, but that they're actually working to keep their skills up. They're not worried about making mistakes. They're worried, can you read that? Oh, maybe. Well, let's see if it does something else. They're not worried about making mistakes. So there are plenty of mistakes in here. They're investing with their hands, they're playing, and principally, they're not worrying so much. So a quick ending story. About a couple years ago, I got a phone call because I really like working with kids on technology. And this woman asked me if I wanted to be on a reality show teaching science. And I heard the science part, and I didn't hear the reality show part. But long story, but after, you know, I went out there to interview, I got thrown in a car, and I was standing on the curb trying to, you know, rehearse my lines about how happy I was to meet them. They came by, threw a bandana around me, threw me in the back of a car, did 3 days of testing, including asking me tests like, I feel like killing people. I was like, no, I don't really feel like killing people. Aliens control my thoughts. I remember that one. Because that's really hard, because if they did control your thoughts, What would you say? Yeah, but anyway, long story, I ended up on this show 59 days in this crazy place. We had to figure out how to make, purify our water. We had to I ate a lot of rats for a vegetarian. It was kind of a weird thing. We ended up having a great time. The one interesting thing, though, is on the third day it started raining, and water was really hard to come by. So my 9 colleagues, it was really weird because I was on there with 9 crazy people, and I was the only sane person. My 9 colleagues went out to grab the water, and I ran out the back door and threw my clothes off. And I had one of these Mikey things on, and I threw them off, and I'm standing there. And what happened, I turned around, and there was a guy with a $200,000 camera looking at me. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'd pick up that sheet of plastic." And I was like, yeah, whatever. So that was day 3. 56 days later, I went home, went back to work, trying to figure out what just happened. And that was, the beginning of the summer. The show was starting at the end of summer, and I got asked to go down to our headquarters in Armonk, New York. And so I drove down there, and I was talking to the number 2 person in IBM, head of communications. And he asked me about the show, and I was kind of nervous about it, but we were supposed to talk for 20 minutes. We talked for an hour and a half, and he was really excited about all the science and how IBM was going to be portrayed, and I was like, yeah. So anyway, I'm driving home, and I called one of the other people who was in the meeting, and I was really worried because do you have reality TV? Every third word is beep, and I was like, I don't know how that's going to go. And my friend said, don't worry, as long as you kept your clothes on. All right. So 3 days later, I was sitting in a room like this, watching on TV with my wife, who was actually on the show too. And that was after I picked up the plastic. So I was really worried. I was thinking that my career was over. I would never be able to hold my head up. And, my kids are seeing this. My parents are seeing this. The second in command in IBM is seeing this. And I was really nervous. I thought my career just had sunk. Because you know how, like, in all of our lives, if we say, if this report doesn't go well, I won't get the deal. If I don't get the deal, I won't get the promotion. If I don't get the promotion, that woman won't marry me, and then we won't have the kids. And I was just doing this. And the weird thing is that the next time, 6 weeks later, I happened to run into this guy. And I was still really just kind of like avoiding eye contact with everybody. And all he said is, dude, you should get more sun. And I was like... So the basic point I would leave you with is technology is a great equalizer. You have to use it with respect. You have to get involved, play with it. And as you do that, don't worry so much. So thank you very much. Did I talk about the right amount?
Sorry?
Did I talk about the right amount?
Yeah, it was perfect. I
about
just
the
wanted to thank you.
Okay,
absolutely on time. Great German. So now we would have time for a few question and answers if someone from the audience wants to.
Or rebuttals. Yes.
Don't you think that the digital divide exists already? I mean, we're talking about connecting things, and then we think about sub-Saharan Africa where there aren't many things to connect.
I think you're on the exact right point, and that's where I was trying to go, is that there's this virtuous cycle in the West where everybody has stuff, and it's there to connect, and the data comes with it. But it's exactly the problem that until you get that seed of having the things there, it's very hard to prime that. And that's where I think we're not doing enough. So that was my point. I don't know how we have to do this, but right now the economics in the West, at least, is that people can afford the toys, whatever, even if it's something for good like that, and then they get the benefit. We have to figure out how to shift the cost of these to the away from the people who need it. It turns out to that. So I think it's a very real problem, and just like with medicine, where the West invests in medical innovation, and they say, hey, we need to charge a lot of money for it, but those medicines are really needed in places like the tropics. So I don't have a good answer. I think that advocacy, and I think that clever inversion of normal capitalistic things. So for example, the way, we want to be altruistic, but you can't always be. The reason I was able to get the $1 million to put those sensors down there is because they help us with weather prediction. But the real goal, we had to figure out how to move the economics so doing that made sense. That's not always possible, but I think it's a real danger.
Hi, my research is in the domain of work and the world of work, and
I've heard of it. Yeah.
well, precisely, I was really inspired by your playful approach, and I love this concept of do it, don't worry so much about it. Do you feel like this is shared among in the culture of IBM? If so, what has the company done to promote that? And if not, if you're kind of a just a carefree trailblazer in that sense, what keeps you going, or how do you convert people around you?
No, I think that's a really interesting question. It's something that we wrestle with as a company a lot. I think a lot of companies, it's always interesting to see a long-running company, a big company, try to introspect and transform. I cringe whenever I hear a company like mine saying, we're going to transform. We're always transforming. We're always changing. And I think that this culture, I will say that in our company, that culture is deep, but it's in danger. It's always in danger. And like our CEO, our founder, Thomas Watson Sr., said two things which I think were really, he said three things. How's it? Yeah. He said, first of all, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. I tried using that in a meeting the other day, didn't go over. He said that when things are not going well, he goes out and plays like he did with it when he was a kid. And that was very interesting. And more importantly, he started, there's this Danish writer, Sorensen, that wrote a story, or is it Kierkegaard? I don't remember, who wrote the story of the wild duck. The duck that's flying the wrong way, or I don't remember what it is. But we have a thing, one of our 9 principles is that we treasure wild ducks. Oftentimes, I think we end up making them into mild ducks. I think we have a culture, what I find is what we say versus what we do. But what I really find is that you can't have a policy that says, play is now authorized, or you must do 11% of play, or we're going to increase play by 0.04%. But what I do find, I sort of made this comment, but when I actually, so there's 90 IBM fellows, and they're very diverse, men, women, all over the planet. And when we get together, they're goofballs. Wie sagt man goofball? Wahnsinn. Oder etwas, I don't know. So they're crazy. And each of them in their own way, not 100% of them, have kept that playful spirit. But when we start talking about it, what I would say is, what a company does to support that, sometimes it's awkward. I mean, look at me. I'm like a clown, right? I'm like a technology clown. Then I have to go upstairs and be a grown-up. It's hard, right? So, because you have to sort of overdo it, and then you get branded that way. On the other hand, I feel like doing this kind of stuff and what my peers do gives people permission, like how bad can it be? So I think those are the kinds of things that you can do. But I think that's a really interesting thing. I think this notion about not a culture of worry, when you're in a big company, and maybe even worse in a small company, you end up with this culture of worry that really chokes that out of you. And I think the idea of play, it's very easy to say, very hard to do. But I think what you have to do, it's like meditating, where you have to go, I know I'm not playing, and you have to find your way back. It's not like you can be perfectly in sync. But I think it's important that we demonstrate, we come out as players, or I don't know, but what do you think? I'm really curious about this. This is something that really is on my mind.
I really relate to this idea of worry. Like, if you get so obsessed with, what am I supposed to be doing? Are we doing the right things? And then you don't do anything except worry, right? So you specifically stop exploring. But I do think it's hard because I think in the world of business, and I'm surprised to hear that at IBM, people would be playful because you kind of hear this about the IBM way of dressing and the IBM, there's like a dress code that people had to follow for many years. So I guess you didn't get that memo.
I didn't get the memo.
But I do agree that playing can be hard because you can be seen as not someone to be taken seriously, right? You're not, and business is serious. So, I wonder to what extent it's just a rebellion of people, or if it's are companies really able to foster and encourage that?
I think the best way to do it is to find it when it happens rather than explicitly try to promote it. And I think, one great story, sorry, it's a me story, it's another me story, but a patent. I have, my favorite patent was a mistake. I love that. It was a math error. We were sitting there doing something, had to do with how chips shrink from technology to technology, and we were sitting up there with my colleagues, and I put a minus sign where it meant a plus sign, and my friend went and erased it, and we went, I can't say what we really said, but it was like, holy. And we, long story, but we saved $350 million from that. But it was a mistake. So we tell that story. It's easy to tell that story. I think when people maybe try too hard, and look at me, it isn't as effective as when you find somebody who's stumbled across something by, quote, playing, I think that would be a good creative morning thing.
Should we ask a question perhaps in the back?
Serious play.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Is this what?
This is especially for Christina, who asked me not to ask questions today. So I'm quite interested in how you would see the combination of one having to take responsibility as the community of let's say explorers we are, and at the same time to maintain this playful element, because I see an inherent contradiction. At the same time, I agree with you, but I'm curious how you implement that in your larger scale.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the contradiction?
In the sense that, so for instance, technology having the potential to wipe out 20 million jobs over the next 10 years with the robotication and the automation that we're going to see in transport, for instance, versus the playful component that might or might not inspire the solution for that. I see how they could build on each other. At the same time, I'm mostly curious as to how you see that.
And I think that's a very, I use my nuclear power analogy is that it can be good, it can be bad, right? Or it can be, some people think it's all bad, or actually I think it's all bad. But I think you have to be very careful. I think you can advocate, you can lead towards the good. And I think if we each have an idea and we can lead towards the good, I find that, because we don't have an absolute and we don't know the future. You can. It kind of comes back to worry. We can fear about displacing jobs. I mean, and that since the Industrial Revolution, people have been worried about exactly that. Now, if you stop innovating because of that, I think the world suffers. But if you don't consider the impact, like the digital divide or privacy or things like that, you can have negative consequences. To me, I think what we have to be as technical leaders or design thinkers, whatever we're doing, we have to lead towards the place that our conscience shows us, because there is no absolute. And I think the playful part, to me, there's different ways of leading. There's the sort of forceful lead, I am your boss, go do this, which kind of ultimately the worst, or the when we form governments and they, governments say you shall or you shall not. That's not a very effective way of getting creative people to go, not just follow you, but to surpass you. So I think that the playful aspect is kind of like the Pied Piper, if I can use it. How do I pull people towards what I believe? And I realize that's a little bit chaotic, right? In the absence of an absolute, that that this is morally right and this is morally wrong. I mean, there's certain things we don't want to do, but for something like this, I think everybody has to make you have to have ethics and conscience in any decisions you make, and then you advocate for them, and you get people to follow you so that they can surpass you. And I think that's where play, people, let me tell you, a lot of the work, I'll give you a very concrete thing, a lot of the work that we're doing in this building, because we're just ramping up, is because it looked like we were having so much fun that people are volunteering. So we're getting people coming through on shifts from other sites because they want to play here. And then once they're here, they we put them to work. So I think, no, but I think whatever you do, it's much easier to get like the Tom Sawyer thing about painting the wall. If you're having fun, and genuinely, people can tell, then you'll get people to contribute to what you're doing. And the interesting thing is, it's not just to subjugate them, it's to get them interested so that their brains, their talents can build on it. But I think that there's always that contradiction, and I think you're really on a good point.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
How do you combine that with the rather absolute ownership structure of technology today? I mean, if we look at AI, for instance, there's, let's say, 3, and if we were to count China into that as well, where probably Baidu and Tencent are probably developing their own engines. How is that going to play out?
So let me see if I understand. So you're saying how when a large company owns your data?
Well, when essentially 4 or 5 large companies own almost all data, because that's sort of where we're headed.
So yes, this is a topic that I feel very strongly about. One of the interesting things and this is not an ad for IBM, we have, everybody's got to pick their competitive piece, and what we do is that your data is your data, whether it's individual or an enterprise. So I love Amazon, my Amazon Echo. I love my Google Home. I love Google Search and Google Maps. But you're willingly giving up information for some good. I think most people make an informed decision on it. But it does scare me. It scares me not so much that it'll be abused, but I don't want my insights being monetized by someone else. I want that protected. So I think that we have to be huge advocates. We have to know when we're going to click that, yes, you can share this data. But what I ultimately believe is that we need to create ways of collecting and sharing data that we curate, or we have an AI that curates. We have a thing called My Watson, which is essentially your data, usually kind of enterprise, but now even more consumer, which you would have control over, to give you economic power. It's not so much about privacy, actually. It's about, look, when I'm going to spam you with ads, if I can tell the ad givers, I'm only interested about this. I'll even give you personally curated data. So, Facebook, I just saw an article. They have 98 things that they know about you. Income, favorite drinking preferences. It's just all this crazy stuff. But if I curate it, it's much more valuable to even if I want to have ads sold to me, or if I want to share it for health reasons. So I think we need to create data commons where we as individuals, we as small groups, we as enterprises own that data, and then figure out how to track it. It's a long story, but you know what blockchain is? Okay, so you always have to put multiple hype technologies together, but IoT, blockchain, and AI, put it in a jar and shake it. I think that we can create an economy where those data sets, those knowledge sets, are actually monetizable. Now, I had, on a device thing, okay. So,
of course.
So one of the inherent weirdnesses, that's a technical term, of IoT is, right now, IoT means your device, your refrigerator, your BMW, your hearing aid, whatever, talks to a particular cloud instance, and it sort of belongs to that, okay? That's not democratized, right? So I believe that things like technologies like blockchain can actually democratize the relationship between devices so that they can negotiate on your behalf, or you can negotiate. I'm gonna, after I'm tired of, I don't want to use a client's name, name a car brand that we don't work with. Oh, you can't. No, I mean, no, but in other words, if you have that basically I could negotiate, or I can let some entrepreneur, 2 girls in a garage can figure out some way of making a better use of that data and give you a better offer, I should be able to do it. I wrote a paper on that in 2013 and almost got fired from IBM because of that, because it was kind of viewed as anti-cloud. It was called device democracy, and it was a kind of a forethought of how economics of things like blockchain, part of Bitcoin, could be used to arbitrate those things. And now it's like a huge growing business in the company. The same people who told me, you never say that word, are now going around telling me that they thought of it. you know that that's a good. No. But you know what? That's the funny thing. Kind of going back to the questions about how you lead. You have to be somewhat selfless with these things because, if you're really innovating in an open world, you have to be willing, just like your kids, to let them go out and not get credit. I mean, things like credit, patents, things like that are kind of anti-innovative. No, don't ever quote me as an IBM guy saying that. I have a lot of patents, but I think the idea where we're trying to attribute credit to who invented that, et cetera, who thought of that first, runs counter to this idea of, kind of the virtuous cycle of innovation. So, but anyway, wherever. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Thank you very
thanks.
much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Yeah.